Obina and Amara had known each other since they were kids. They grew up in the same neighborhood in Enugu, played in the same dusty streets, and attended the same school. Their families were close, and everyone joked that they were like brother and sister.
But as they grew older, something changed. The innocent childhood friendship slowly turned into something deeper. At first, it was just long conversations under the mango tree after school, stolen glances, and shy smiles. Then came the late-night calls and secret meetings when their parents were not home. One evening, during the long holiday, Amara's parents traveled to the village for a family event. Obina came over to keep her company, as he often did. They laughed, watched movies, and talked about their dreams. How Obina wanted to become an engineer and Amara dreamed of becoming a nurse. But that night, things went further than they ever had before. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something they had even talked about. One moment, they were just two close friends enjoying each other's company. The next, they had crossed a line neither of them truly understood. At first, nothing seemed different. Life continued as usual. They went back to school when the holiday was over, pretending like nothing had happened. But weeks later, Amara began to notice changes in her body. She felt tired all the time, her appetite changed, and then, she missed her period.
Fear gripped her heart. She tried to convince herself that it was nothing, that maybe her cycle was just irregular, but deep down, she knew something was wrong. One afternoon, after school, she pulled Obina aside. They stood behind the school building, where no one could hear them. "Obina, I think I'm pregnant," she whispered, her voice shaking.
Obina felt like the ground had opened up beneath him. What? No, you can't be sure.
Amara nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I missed my period, and I feel different." Obina's mind raced. He was just 17. He had no job, no money, and still had to write WAEC. What would people say? What would his parents do if they found out? "We have to be sure first," he said. "Maybe it's something else." But deep down, he already knew the truth. Neither of them was ready for what was coming.
Obina couldn't sleep that night. Amara's words kept echoing in his head. "I think I'm pregnant." His heart pounded against his chest as he tossed and turned in his small room. How could this be happening? They were just teenagers.
The next day, he met Amara behind the school building again. She looked pale and tired, her usual bright smile replaced with worry. "I got a test kit," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm going to check tonight." Obina swallowed hard. "Okay, call me as soon as you do." That night, Obina waited for her call like a man waiting for a death sentence. When his phone finally vibrated, he hesitated before answering. "Obina," Amara's voice was weak, almost lifeless. "It's positive." A cold shiver ran down his spine. He felt like vomiting. "Are you sure?" he asked, even though he knew she wouldn't lie about something like this. "Yes," she sniffed. "What are we going to do?" Obina had no answer. He was still trying to figure out how his life had changed in just a few hours. The next few days were a nightmare. Amara was getting sicker, throwing up in the mornings, struggling to focus in class, and feeling dizzy all the time. She had to pretend she had malaria to avoid suspicion. Obina, on the other hand, was losing his mind. He couldn't focus on his studies, couldn't eat properly, and was constantly distracted. His friends, Chinedu and Emeka, noticed. "Guy, wetin dey do you?" Chinedu asked one afternoon after school. "Nothing," Obina lied, but Emeka wasn't convinced. "No be nothing, since last week, you just dey look like person wey devil dey follow." Obina wanted to tell them, but how could he? The shame was too much. He was supposed to be the smart one, the one with big dreams. Now, he had gotten his best friend pregnant. Meanwhile, Amara was struggling to hide her condition from her mother, but one evening, as she tried to force down her food, her mother, Mama Amara noticed something was wrong. Amara, you have not been eating well, she said, frowning, and you have been looking weak. Are you sure it's just malaria? Amara forced a smile. Yes, Mama, I'm just stressed. But Mama Amara wasn't convinced. Days turned into weeks, and hiding the truth became harder. Amara's uniforms were getting tighter, and the sickness wasn't going away. She and Obina knew they had to make a decision before their parents found out on their own. One afternoon, after school, they sat under the big mango tree behind Amara's house. We have to tell them, Amara whispered, staring at the ground. Obina felt his heart stop. Tell who? Our parents.
Obina shook his head. No, no way. Do you know what will happen? My father will kill me. And my mother will kill me too, Amara said, tears in her eyes. But we can't hide it forever.
Obina rubbed his hands over his face. He had never been so scared in his life, but deep down, he knew she was right. The night before they planned to confess, Amara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. What would her mother say? Would she throw her out? Would she be disappointed? On the other side of town, Obina sat outside his house, looking at the stars. His father, a strict man who always talked about discipline, would surely disown him. His mother would cry for days. As he sat there, his phone rang. It was Amara. Obina, she whispered, panic in her voice. His stomach clenched. What is it? I think my mother suspects something. She asked me again today, and I think she's going to find out soon. Obina felt like the walls were closing in. This was it. The secret was about to explode, and there was no stopping it. The next morning, Amara woke up to her mother standing by the door, arms crossed, a suspicious look in her eyes. Amara, we need to talk, Mama Amara said firmly. Amara's heart pounded. She knew this moment would come, but she wasn't ready.
Yes, Mama. She sat up, trying to act normal. Mama Amara sighed. I have been watching you. You're always tired, you're throwing up, and your body is changing. Tell me the truth. Are you pregnant?
Amara felt a lump in her throat. Her vision blurred with tears. Lying wouldn't help anymore. Mama, her voice cracked. I didn't mean for this to happen. Mama Amara gasped, staggering backward like she had been slapped. She placed a hand on her chest. Chineke, Amara, you have killed me, she wailed, her voice shaking the walls. Amara burst into tears, falling to her knees. I'm sorry, Mama, I didn't mean for this to happen. It was a mistake. The sound of her mother's cry filled the house. Neighbors peeked through their windows, wondering what was going on. Mama Amara paced back and forth, shaking her head. Who is responsible? She asked suddenly, her voice sharp like a knife. Amara hesitated, her heart racing. She knew what would happen if she said Obina's name, but she couldn't lie. It's Obina, she whispered. Mama Amara froze. Then, without warning, she grabbed her wrapper and stormed out of the house. Obina was just finishing his breakfast when he heard loud banging on the gate. Open this door now, a familiar voice screamed. His mother, Mama Obina, rushed to the door. Confused, she swung it open and found Mama Amara standing there, her eyes red with fury. Your son has ruined my daughter's life, she shouted. Obina, who had been standing in the living room, felt his soul leave his body. What are you talking about? Mama Obina asked, frowning.
Ask your son. Mama Amara pointed at Obina. He got my daughter pregnant.
A deep silence filled the air. Obina felt like he was standing on hot coals. His mother slowly turned to look at him, her face a mixture of shock and disbelief. Obina, is this true? She asked, her voice shaking. Obina opened his mouth, but no words came out. He felt his father's heavy footsteps approaching from the back of the house. What is going on here? Papa Obina's deep voice rang through the compound.
Before anyone could answer, Mama Amara exploded. Your son got my daughter pregnant. That's what's going on.
Papa Obina's face darkened instantly. His eyes burned into Obinna like fire. Obinna, you did what? Obinna's legs felt weak. He wished the ground would just open and swallow him.
I'm sorry, Papa, he mumbled, his voice barely audible.
Papa Obinna's hand flew so fast that Obinna didn't see it coming. A hot slap landed on his face, sending him stumbling backward. Useless boy, his father roared. After all my efforts to give you a better life, this is what you do. Obinna's mother started wailing. My God, what have I done to deserve this shame? Neighbors were gathering now, whispering among themselves. The news was spreading like wildfire. Mama Amara wiped her tears angrily. Your son must take responsibility. He must marry my daughter. At those words, Obinna's heart stopped. Marriage, he wasn't even done with secondary school. He had no money, no job, no future yet. How could he marry Amara? Papa Obinna frowned. Marry, he is still a boy, and my daughter is still a girl. Mama Amara fired back. But she is carrying his child, isn't she? What will people say, that my daughter is a prostitute? Obinna and Amara exchanged fearful glances. Everything was falling apart too fast. She must remove it, Papa Obinna suddenly said. A heavy silence followed. Everyone turned to him in shock. Over my dead body, Mama Amara shouted, abortion is a sin. My daughter will not kill an innocent child because your son was irresponsible. Mama Obinna collapsed on the chair, wailing louder. Obinna's heart pounded. What was he supposed to do? His father wanted the pregnancy gone. Amara's mother wanted him to marry her, and he didn't even know what he wanted. Amara reached for his hand, her eyes filled with tears. Obinna, what do we do? But Obinna had no answer. His whole life was crashing down, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The sun was setting, but the tension in Obinna's compound refused to fade. Neighbors were still gathered, whispering among themselves, waiting to see how the chaos would end. Mama Amara stood firm, her arms crossed, refusing to leave until a decision was made. Papa Obinna paced back and forth, his face hard as stone. Mama Obinna sat on a stool, sobbing into her wrapper. Obinna and Amara sat together in the corner, their hands trembling. This was bigger than them now. She must remove it, Papa Obinna repeated, and I said no. Mama Amara fired back. My daughter is not a murderer. Papa Obinna shook his head. Then don't expect my son to marry her. He is still a child. And my daughter is not a widow. Mama Amara shot back. She won't raise this baby alone. Obinna had never seen his father speechless before, but Papa Obinna had no solution, no way to fix this. He was a proud man, and this disgrace was too much for him. After what felt like hours, an elder from the neighborhood, Pa Chukwudi, stepped forward. He had been watching the argument silently, shaking his head. Enough, he said, his voice calm but firm. This shouting will not solve anything. The deed has been done. We must find a way forward.
The crowd fell silent. Obinna and Amara are still children, he continued. They are not ready for marriage. Forcing them will only destroy their future.
Mama Amara wiped her eyes. So what do we do, Papa Chukwudi? He sighed. The baby must be born, but they will not marry now. Obinna must take responsibility as the father, but both of them must finish school. Obinna's father scoffed. And who will take care of the baby? Money does not fall from the sky. Mama Amara squared her shoulders. I will take care of my grandchild. Obinna spoke up for the first time. I will work, he said, his voice shaky but determined. I will do whatever it takes to support the baby. I won't run away from my mistake. Amara squeezed his hand. She had been scared, but hearing Obinna take responsibility gave her a little hope. The elders nodded. Then it is settled, Pa Chukwudi said. The children will stay with their families, finish school, and take care of the baby together. When they are older, they can decide their future. Mama Amara agreed reluctantly. Papa Obinna didn't like it, but he had no choice. The decision had been made.
Days turned into weeks. The whispers in the neighborhood faded, but life had changed forever.
Obina got a small job at a car wash after school. It wasn't much, but he saved every naira he could. Amara focused on her studies, determined not to let her pregnancy stop her from achieving her dreams. Months later, Amara gave birth to a baby boy. He was small and fragile, but the moment Obina held him, something in his heart changed.
I will never abandon you, he whispered to his son. I will be better. I will make sure you have a good life. Their journey was far from over. There would be struggles, sacrifices, and difficult days ahead. But one thing was certain, Obina and Amara were no longer just teenagers. They were now parents, learning to navigate a world that had forced them to grow up too soon. If you enjoyed this story, please support us by subscribing, liking and sharing.